Now, it's the government who will decide which one is factual news and which one is fake. Laws and punishments are revised, and plagiarism is also decided by the government. The freedom of press is already curbed in Kashmir. Now, they add on new media policy.
Not that journalists in Jammu have not been targeted or not are not under fear. Anybody today who speaks the truth or wants to speak the truth is a target.
जैसे आप अपना काम कर रहे हो, आपको ऑर्डर्स मिले गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से कि आप कर्फ्यू लगा, तो मेरा भी काम है कि मैं दिखाऊं कि क्या है
possible. But I believe it is also an opportunity. It's also an opportunity for quality journalism to come out and storytelling taking a form which was never seen before. We're trying to walk this very thin line where we don't get the backlash. I mean, we can only avoid it to a certain extent.
A very thin line that is like that can actually give you shock at any time. We can say
absolutely. See, one can never be sure. But was it different before this media policy came? I don't believe that it was any different before the media policy. It is only that the government has accepted and put it on paper that this is what we're doing.
We don't know a lot of things. The people from even in I can't say in Kashmir, but people who live outside, they don't know a lot of things, and these stories should come out. These stories should be out there.
Assalamu alaikum. I welcome you all to the 7th episode of Straightforward. This is your host Aniqa. Recently, the government of India introduced new media policy, an attack on fourth pillar of democracy. Now, it's the government who will decide which one is factual news and which one is fake. Laws and punishments are revised, and plagiarism is also decided by the government. The freedom of press is already curbed in Kashmir. Now, they add on new media policy. Recently, we have seen attacks on journalists, like booking them under UAPA for reasons wide. Intimidated, harassed, journalists are being detained without any warning, and they have also restricted the reach of online media portals. So you might have an idea what today's show is going to be about, the attack on press. For today's show, the guests who will join us are Anuradha Bhasin, the editor of Kashmir Times, a prominent journalist, a peace activist who has always been vocal about every issue, has been on the brunt of oppression for her bold and clear thoughts. She is the first person who filed a petition in Supreme Court after the abrogation of 370 and restoration of communication and internet in Jammu and Kashmir. It's my honor to have you, ma'am, today in our episode. Qazi Zaid, the editor of Free Press Kashmir, one of the leading online news portals of Kashmir. He is a journalist as well as a mentor for various journalism courses. He has given a factual, on point, and real news since 3-4 years. I welcome you, sir, today. Sajad Hameed is an independent Thank you. Sajad Hameed is an independent photojournalist who is a freelancer who has worked with various independent and some international news organizations also. While reporting his stories, he has faced so many challenges. His camera was snatched. He was physically abused. And above all this, he came above all these hurdles and still started his work with same enthusiasm. I welcome you today. I welcome you at today's episode. Mehr Nisa, our fourth and last guest. She is a student of mass communication and journalism from Kashmir. She is also a blog writer. She has worked in few organizations as a writer. Mehr, I welcome you in our today's episode.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Thank you. Anuradha, ma'am, I would like to start with you. How do you see the impact of new media policies these days? Already, the press has been curbed here to some extent. And now this. How do you see the involvement and intimidation by the government on media fraternity and regular summons to the journalists?
A lot of actions have preceded the media policy, which are actually part of the media policy, but the policy itself came much later. I mean, in the sense that their journalists have been intimidated for no particular reason at all. They are picked up, they have been summoned to cargo by the cyber police or to other police stations and questioned about their stories, asked for their sources, or intimidated and threatened with that they would be slapped with cases. We have criminal cases slapped against at least 3 journalists and probably many more. You know, these kind of, or Qazi Shibli and other journalists who have been jailed for quite some time. And these are things that are much in line with what the media policy is. For instance, the government has the right to decide what is fake news. There are going to be no professionals to do that. There is going to be no body of experts to do that. The information department will decide. Now, actions, since they have already been taken, so when the media policy was just brought into the public domain, that the journalists were already operating under a realm of fear. And the fear also existed because there was a lockdown, because last year they were unable to operate. One, there was fear, and this fear was enhanced because there was no communication. So when you
Yeah,
are cut off, you are unable to talk, there is a sense of powerlessness with that. That
exactly.
inability to talk, the inability to communicate, the inability to mobilize and reach out to your own colleagues, the inability to work because your tools have been taken away. All these things enhance that fear. So when that policy came, that fear was already deeply embedded in the minds of most journalists. The government really didn't have to say anything along with that. They'd already done their job.
Exactly. Like right now, I'm talking about like the intimidation and the harassment. For you personally, how did you overcame this?
Look, I must say that I come from a more privileged position. I am not a Kashmiri Muslim. So,
Mm-hmm.
not that journalists in Jammu have not been targeted or are not under fear. Anybody today who speaks the truth or wants to speak the truth is a target.
में जैसे आप अपना काम कर रहे हो, आपको ऑर्डर्स मिले हैं गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से कि आप कर्फ्यू लगा, तो मेरा भी काम है कि मैं दिखाऊं कि क्या है, अगर कुछ हो रहा है तो मैं दिखाऊं कि क्या हो रहा है। तो ये सिचुएशन है यहाँ पे। तो गवर्नमेंट हमें समझ नहीं पा रही है, हमारे काम को समझ नहीं पा रही है, ना हमें बोलती है कि वजह क्या है, क्यों हमें मारा पीटा जा रहा है, क्यों हमें हर टाइम हिरास किया जा रहा है।
Mm-hmm. Okay,
तो
okay.
अगर
Thank you, Sajad. Thank you so much. Okay. We would like to stop you here. My next question would be for you, Nisa. As a student of journalism and mass communication, when you see journalists are being intimidated, booked under various laws, what is the first thought that comes to your mind that either you or one of your close associate who is in the same field can be one day in the similar situation? Do you regret the choice of choosing this career, or there is a different ideology?
Yeah, so first of all, I've just started out. I recently completed my graduation, so I don't know. There is not a feeling of regret or remorse when I think about choosing this career, but there is a constant feeling of anxiety or worry that it can happen to me or someone I know or anybody. I mean, in a professional way, like just because of our professions. So that fear is always there, but when it comes to regret, it is not there, because when I started doing my degree, or when I was when I actually got to know about that I can do something like this, because I guess I was just a teenager at that time. And at
Mm-hmm.
that time we didn't have much access to social media or stuff. So I was interested because it was a way of telling my story, or telling my people's story to the world in a way. And right now it's the only thing, the like the storytelling, the journalists are being slapped by UAPA or PSA just because of this thing, that they are sharing the stories of people, they are sharing the truth, they are providing a platform for truth. So it is actually, I guess, there is fear, there is a constant worry, but there is no regret. I mean, I am not regretting, but I am really what I would say, I'm really I want to explore uh, this field and see what it has
Field,
for
your
me.
field. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So, but there is not a feeling of regret.
Okay, okay, that's great. Qazi Zaid, my next question is for you. There has been a massive shift of audience from print to online. What can you, according to you, what can be the exact reason, and how do you maintain the quality of news, taking all your ethics together, knowing that how there is this violation of facts going on overall?
That's a very difficult question to answer because it's a phenomenon that we're seeing worldwide. It's not something that is very limited to Kashmir. Uh, I mean, ever since people have, you have the advent of smartphones, and now you have so much of information consumption on your phone. I mean, it requires a lot of study to see what is the exact percentage. But we do know that more and more people are shifting from print to online. And at least if the revenue is not in online, but the readership is there. We are a print and online news organization, but the maximum audience that we receive is online, over 90%. And out of that, over 85% is coming from social media. So it's just that social media has taken over, and they've huge resources with them of how to move the audiences there. Even now, there's social engineering happening in how people's responses and their emotions are being documented. I think it's a very successful, I wouldn't say about the good and bad, but it's a very successful thing that has happened, that has moved the audiences onto social media. Now, here's where the game is for us. As news organizations, we are also sometimes competing with cat videos, which are so interesting. People are scrolling on their phones, looking at cat videos, which are catchy. And in the middle, we are also existing on the same platform as publishers. And sometimes it gets very, very tricky of to give out information when the attention span of a person has reduced to lesser than 8 seconds, and which is why you see so many news organizations now looking at clickbait, trying these techniques out. And when your question about ethics is where it gets very tricky for us, but that is what, as credible news organizations, we must do. It's a challenge. I don't have any answers. We're also exploring. The journalism 101, the textbook journalism that is there, I feel that there is still readership for it. We've tried to have this long form journalism for our organization and try and tell stories which are interesting. And we found that people are interested if your content is strong enough, whether it be online, whether it be print. There've always been takers for serious work, serious journalism.
Like you can say quality matters, right?
Absolutely.
Quality and the credibility of news.
See what new organizations, especially with the organizations that have gone online, are now also experimenting with multimedia content. You see that some videos which news organizations are producing have millions and millions of views, which means that the audience is still there, it's interested, and you have to find creative ways, new ways of adapting the newsroom to this new technology or this new form of information consumption. Uh, uh, there are many organizations, international organizations, which are now using text on video. They're using the format of 1 by 1 in videos, right? And I find that they are working. And I don't think that journalism or ethics are not compatible with it. There is a huge debate that this technology is built in a way that it favors fake news. It favors things that appeal to the emotions. But here is where our role also comes in as a news organization with an editorial, which sort of filters fake news from facts. And with organizations which build their credibility, I think people always want to look up to, or finally, if it's in this organization, then it must be a fact. Of course, now there's a whole debate of how the corporate takeover has basically put those things aside, and now people are pushing agendas and political positions instead of facts and journalism. But I think our brand of journalism, where you exist in an environment which is comparable only to North Korea, probably, is sort of suicide journalism. I don't see what else it could be. Uh, you have Shibli as an example of speaking truth to
Exactly.
power in conditions which are almost impossible. But I believe it is also an opportunity. It's also an opportunity for quality journalism to come out, and storytelling taking a form which was never seen before. We're
Yes,
trying to
yes.
walk this very thin line where we don't get the backlash. I mean, we can
I
only
guess
avoid
a
it to a
very
certain
thin line,
extent.
that is like that can actually give you shock at any time. We can say,
Absolutely.
okay,
See, one
something
can
like
never
that.
be sure. But was it
Exactly.
different before this media policy came? I don't believe that it
Hmm.
was any different before the media policy. It is only that the government has accepted and put it on paper that this is what we're doing. You know, we're
Exactly.
profiling you, we're looking at everything that you're writing. But the state was anyways doing all of these things earlier. So it's almost like a step forward.
Exactly. Exactly. My next question is for you. You run a popular a Kashmir online independent organization. What challenges do you have? Like we recently read somewhere, actually reports, not somewhere, these are the reports which we read that various newspapers in Kashmir received massive amount, approximately 8 crore during ongoing global pandemic. When what economic issues does an independent organization face, and are there any chances of survival? If yes, then what?
I mean, this is questioning our entire existence, um, because if there's no chances of survival, then we're probably again doing the suicide journalism. But the point that I would like to make here is, if we look at the context in which we are speaking post August 5th, if we draw a milestone there, there are two forms of censorship that we saw. One is the direct censorship where your communication lines were cut. As journalists or as editors, we could not get in touch with our reporters. We didn't know where they were. Uh, our journalists couldn't file stories. Now in new age, new age journalism is heavily reliant on internet and communication, whether it's talking to sources or filing the story, sending it to the editorial. The editorial back in the newsroom has to receive copies to be able to edit and communicate with our audience, because we're that bridge between the public and the policymakers also. So in that scenario, the the censorship that we faced was unprecedented in that sense. But I feel, in a way, we could have circumvented, we could have bypassed that, uh, had we started operating from, say, New Delhi. Have we started operating
Mhm.
from any place else other than Kashmir?
Where
We
internet
could
was
have,
working
but
or communication.
the the internet was working. But the challenge was that our audiences were offline. Who would we be speaking to? We can't be
Mhm.
publishing in a void when our audiences are offline. And where do we get that information from? Because if you're sitting in New Delhi, we had examples of New Delhi news organizations putting out only government versions, and that's not what we
Versions.
do. But this form of censorship, I believe, is still the visible form of censorship. But the invisible form of censorship is when revenue is controlled. Now,
Mhm.
there are organizations which depend on the state for functioning. And if the state is paying your bill, then you're supposed to toe a certain line. And
Mhm.
this form of censorship, I believe, is controlling the narrative that even news organizations are producing. And news organizations which are not dependent on the state were dependent on an advertisement model. And with the
Exactly.
collapse of the market economy, which corporate entity or which business, because we would rely on small businesses, mom and pop shops, who were advertising with us, they were severely economically hit. So if the newsroom is not able to sustain, we're not able to pay the salaries of our journalists, how are we supposed to produce anything? So this form of
Exactly.
censorship, I believe, was harder, and it is going to hit us as credible or small organizations, independent organizations, much more harder. So it's very difficult to sustain. We've moved towards a subscription model, but now I think it's a new experiment. We're not
Mhm.
receiving a lot of response as of now. We believe that in the coming months or years, maybe subscriptions pile up, that it can at least sustain 10 to 20 or 30% of the newsroom's expenses.
Mhm.
Um, but it's here where it's hitting harder. If a newsroom is also has to sustain economically, if our journalists are supposed to produce work, they have to be paid for it. And for
Exactly.
young students, I wouldn't want to discourage them. I hope that in the scenario or in the place that we are at, there's some form of resistance, I would say, or resilience, and maybe we can push as far as we can.
Uh,
Let's see.
mhm. Okay, yes. Let's see. Let's hope for the worst and be prepared for the worst,
Oh,
actually.
opposite.
Let's hope for the best.
No, we are
Okay.
prepared for the worst. Obviously, our journalists on the ground do face harassment. They do face intimidation. Sometimes the newsroom gets calls or
Mhm.
things like that. But it's part of the job. Occupational hazards.
Exactly. There are. Anuradha ma'am, my next question is for you. There have been allegations there in past, and you yourself have spoken against the deafening silence of the quote unquote mainstream media in times where the narrative of people does not get any earth. Where do you see the future of journalism in coming years? And what measures would you recommend, if any to stop this ongoing silence right now? Ma'am, please unmute your mic.
Yeah. I would say it's
Mhm.
important, first of all, to break this silence, because as long as you are not saying anything, and consciously not saying anything, whether it is fear, whether it is, as Zaid pointed out, this whole revenue model, which is so dependent on the government, even if it's about advertisements or anything. As long as you're not saying anything and you are continuing with your publication, what you are destroying is journalism. And once you've done that, there is no way that you can revive it. um, I don't have a sure shot recipe. I mean, I would not be a competent person to suggest what is the way ahead, because for financially we've been hit for last 10 years, more so in the last 1 year.
Mhm.
So I mean,
1 year.
in 1 decade, our newspaper staff and operation came down to one-fifth of what it was in 2010, and in the last 1 year it has further shrunk. Post COVID, it is even worse. So it's just that stubbornly we are continuing to survive without staff, without funds. And but I can talk about, it's not that this is the end of the road. Perhaps we need to think of more innovative ideas. In the case of Kashmir, it is much, much more difficult because we toyed with. I'm looking at the experiences that we had. We did look at innovative models and we looked at funding. There were funders within
Mhm.
the country. One is, I mean, you get FRCA and you get the foreign funding and all. It's easier to get foreign funding, but it's not easy to get the FRCA certificate. And then with that comes the entire, the baggage of the harassment that would come. Where is this money coming from and all that, and some concocted charges,
Exactly.
so which is what we were not thinking of. But there are enough funders within India who believe that there must be independent media. Now that became
Mhm.
extremely difficult, because when you approach them with the tag of Kashmir, so it's a
Yes.
no-go zone. We
Exactly.
did think of investing more in the digital media, but something or the other kept happening. But I am not entirely in a situation of despair. I think there are ways we can think of. We must emulate some of the successful models outside. One could be a blend of community journalism and professional journalism. That is important, because when you don't have
Mhm.
you go down on your staff, it's going to impact your budget
Impact.
as well.
Exactly.
How do you maximize those voices without maximizing the staff? That's one thing. You
Mhm.
can go in for podcasts, you can go in for YouTube channels. which can be a source of revenue. There are some self-funded models also available. One must look around the world and apply them innovatively within our own situation. I think there is need to do that rather than think of big investments. There won't be any big investments, at least not for now. You can't rely on the government. We don't even want to ask them, because you know what it means. It means that at the end of the day, they want you to toe the line. Advertisement at one point of time was a matter of right. The whole policy of advertisements was made so that independent media could survive. And for years, it's not just now. So governments in the past, in the last 70 years, in fact, have tried to ensure that advertisements are given to hand-picked people, to people who would speak for them. And those who were critical of the government were always persecuted by stopping the advertisements. So this has been something that has been going on for years. It is much more brazen, it's more open. I think somebody just mentioned it. It's just open now. So there are no secrets about it. And I don't think we should delude ourselves any further. We should look for answers. I'm sure there is a way.
There is. Thank you, ma'am. Sajad, my next question is for you. As a photojournalist in a conflict zone, you witness accident or riots, right? Like as a photojournalist, when you go to a place and click pictures. So when you see people injured, so what is your first priority? To take a picture or help that injured person, and the ethical issues you faced while covering an event?
माई फर्स्ट प्रियोरिटी, मेरी फर्स्ट प्रियोरिटी होगी अगर मेरे सामने या कोई भी सिविलियन हो, राइट्स कोई प्रोटेस्टर हो, मतलब कहीं पे सिक्योरिटी पर्सनल हो, या कोई भी हमारे साथ जो जर्नलिस्ट है कोई भी जख्मी हो जाए या कुछ भी उसका नुकसान हो जाए, तो मेरी फर्स्ट प्रियोरिटी ये रहेगी कि पहले मुझे उसकी हेल्प करना। पहली इंसानियत के लिहाज, ना एक जर्नलिस्ट होने के लिहाज, एक इंसानियत के लिहाज, पहले मेरी ये प्रियोरिटी रहेगी कि उसकी हेल्प करना, उसको बचाना, उसको उस एरिया से बाहर निकालना जहाँ पे वो जहाँ पे हालात खराब हो या कुछ भी हो, उसको वहां से पहले रेस्क्यू करना, जख्मी इंसान हो या कुछ भी, पहली उसके बाद भी मैं पिक्चर कैप्चर कर सकता हूँ। मगर बट ऐसे लगता है कि अगर हम देखें किसी इंसान को जख्मी होते हुए, प्रोटेस्टर को, किसी को, क्या अगर हम वहां पे पहुंचते हैं, तो अगर हम रेस्क्यू करने की कोशिश करते हैं, तो लोग हमें बोलते कि आप मत हाथ लगाओ। ये भी एक वजह है कि लोगों के सामने भी हम मुश्किलात बन गए हैं। जैसे कि मैं फोर्सेस की अभी बात कर रहा था कि फोर्स हमें किस तरह ट्रीट कर रही है, वैसे ही लगता है कि अब हमें सिविलियंस भी वैसे ही ट्रीट करते आ रहे हैं। कुछ सालों से वैसे सिविलियंस हमें इसी तरह से ट्रीट करते आ रहे हैं। क्योंकि अगर बात करें कहीं पे, मेरे सामने एक इंसिडेंट हो गया, कुलगाम में एनकाउंटर हुआ था, तो वहाँ पे 2 मिलिटेंट्स मारे गए थे। तो उसके बाद सिविलियंस वहाँ उस स्पॉट पे पहुंचे, तो वहाँ पे 1 से 2 ब्लास्ट हो गए, जिसमें 40 सिविलियंस इंजर्ड हो गए और 7 पूरा तो कंफर्म नहीं है मुझे याद, 7 की शायद डेथ हो गई थी उसमें एक लड़की भी थी। तो जब हमने रेस्क्यू करने की कोशिश की उन सिविलियंस को, तो पहले सिविलियनों ने हमें बताया कि आप यहाँ से दूर रहो, आप यहाँ से फोटो कैप्चर मत करो। ये भी एक प्रॉब्लम बन गई है, क्योंकि आर्म्ड फोर्सेस का कोई भी कैमरामैन जर्नलिस्ट के साथ कभी कहीं पे होता है, अलग होता है, वो भी आता है सिविलियन क्लोथ लगा के, वो फिर जर्नलिस्टों में शामिल हो जाता है। फिर जब
आप सवाल मेरा ये समझ रहे हैं, मैं आपको एथिकल इश्यूज के बारे में और पूछ रही हूँ। ये तो हुआ कि उसके दौरान क्या हुआ, बट मैं कह रही हूँ
मैं आपको वही बताऊंगा।
जी बताएं।
मैं वही जा रहा हूँ, उसी तरफ जा रहा हूँ। तो ऐसा मसला होता है कि अब आप फिर से क्वेश्चन बताइए।
मैं ये कह रही थी कि जब आप कभी फोटोग्राफ उठा रहे हैं, कहीं पे कुछ आप प्रोटेस्ट हो, कोई एनकाउंटर या कुछ भी साइट हो, तब आपके जो मेजर एथिकल इश्यूज जो होते हैं कि आपको कुछ दिए गए, हमारे जर्नलिज्म में हर किसी फोटोग्राफी उसके भी अपने अपने एथिकल इश्यूज हैं, तो
एथिक्स होते
मेजर
हैं,
एथिकल
हाँ।
इश्यूज आप जी अभी आप कौन से फेस कर रहे हैं व्हाइल टेकिंग द पिक्चर?
पहले तो अगर देखा जाए, फेस तो हर तरफ से किया जा रहा है, चाहे वो
जी
प्रोटेस्टर्स की तरफ से हो या आर्म्ड फोर्स की तरफ से हो। फेस तो दोनों तरफ से हमें करना पड़ता है, हर तरफ से हमें फेस करना
जी
पड़ता है।
जी
किसी भी, अगर देखा जाए हम जाए आर्म्ड फोर्स की तरफ से, वहाँ से अलो नहीं किया जाता है, वहाँ से तो हमें
जी जी
लगता है कि हम प्रोटेस्टर्स की तरफ से जाए तो वहाँ से भी लगता है कि वहाँ से भी हमें वहाँ प्रॉब्लम हो जाती है कि कवर करने में, क्योंकि फोर्स की तरफ से हमें कुछ नुकसान ना हो जाए, और प्रोटेस्टर्स की तरफ से हम रहे तो वहाँ से हमें नुकसान उठाना ही पड़ता है, तो ये प्रॉब्लम हो जाती है।
हम्म
तो अगर
जी
हम देखें पिछली, तो कॉलेजेस के 2017 में
जी जी
प्रोटेस्ट हो रहे थे, मैसिव प्रोटेस्ट हो रहे थे कॉलेजों के बाहर।
जी जी
तो वहाँ पे अगर देखा
जी
जाए तो वहाँ पे हर टाइम हमें मुश्किलातों का सामना करना पड़ता था। हर टाइम वहाँ पे कोई ऐसा मसला था कि वहाँ पे दोनों तरफ से जर्नलिस्ट को मतलब अपनी पहले अपनी जान बचाए, मौका नहीं मिलता था कि जर्नलिस्ट अपनी जान बचाए। वहाँ पे वहाँ पे भी प्रॉब्लम हमें
जी
बहुत फेस करनी पड़ती है, आज करते आ रहे हैं और करनी भी पड़ती है अभी हमें।
जी बिल्कुल बिल्कुल सही बात, सही। थैंक यू सजाद. Zad, my next question would be for you. How do you see attacks on journalists and restriction on the reach on the online news organization that on the post you do on daily basis? And what has been your closest encounter with the attack on media? And how do you define it? And what can be the safest way out in case there is one?
I'll start with an anecdote. Post August 5th, when our website was down. So online mein algorithms matter. Your reach will increase if there's more interactivity, if people are engaging with your content. Search engines like Google or social media like Facebook will push your page or your website up if people are engaging, spending more time. So in the scenario
Mm-hmm.
where, say, our website was down for more than 2 or more than 3 months, we had published nothing. So you're hit because you're not producing any content, people are not engaging, so your rankings are going down, which means that you're already on the back foot. Now, in addition to that, our website faced a lot of hacking attempts and attacks. Our page was attacked
Mm-hmm.
by XYZ party, or so our posts, 2000 of our posts on Facebook were reported for dangerous content. So in that scenario, Facebook or Twitter will think that this particular news organization is, or this page is propagating something that is dangerous. It's being reported as fake news. So
Mm-hmm.
in case a political party which is going against news organizations which do not conform, so in that scenario it becomes extremely, there's doubling of these pressures that you are facing. So the pressure that you talked about are journalists facing. I think Sajad has spoken from the ground, and he's better equipped at answering that question, as he did, that what are the the challenges that we face on the ground, whether from one party or another. But as an organization, as a primarily online organization, there are these attacks also which are happening on our website. We have tried to protect ourselves. We've used proxies and whatnot, so that if not directly but indirectly, these
To ensure our work is going
xyz
on.
xyz party does not set their IT cells against you. And we've been partially successful at that, and we've also taken a lot of hit. Our reach has been throttled on Twitter, on Facebook. There are many lists which were shared with social media organizations blacklisting certain URLs, and
URL.
you find that there are news organizations there as well individual handles there as well. So it's in the larger frame of crackdown on thought and crackdown on media. Uh, there are ways out, but these ways are sometimes also very dangerous, and you don't want to, when you weigh the pros and cons, like every hack has a counter hack, right? But
Exactly.
even though you're equipped to counter hack, you might not want to do it because that'll unleash a lot of other forms of violence against you, and
Exactly.
it's not considered wise.
Okay.
But
Thank you. Thank you.
like I would
Okay.
also
Yeah.
want to
Please go ahead.
put another point through, is that there are organizations which are actually reporting or putting out fake news and propaganda videos or hateful content, or calling for genocide, and you see that whether social media organizations or search engines like Google and or Facebook are not blacklisting those organizations. So it's a
Yes.
one-sided, it's a biased, the way the government is functioning. These corporate entities are also functioning because the corporate state nexus worldwide, and India is a huge market. Every news organization, if it mentions Kashmir, it's monitored. Certain keywords are blacklisted. They don't come up on Google News, they're pushed down. So we're trying to find ways to circumvent these. But like I said, there is only certain push that you can give. If you go all out, might have to face closure of the newsroom, which as of now, I think it's not wise.
It's not, obviously, like we are fighting against our own people and some other entities too,
I
like
would say it's a
even.
fight. I would say that uh, it's censorship that we are facing. I mean, of course, you can say that it's a fight. We're fighting censorship. And like I said, there are so many ways that it can be fought very effectively. But
Effectively
being where we are, it might not be wise to take those steps.
take those steps. Yes. Meher, my last question is for you. Meher, pursuing a dream in a conflict zone is not easy. A dream like a journalism, despite knowing what it has along with it. What keeps you going? And personally, what do you want to achieve in this field?
I worked with JKCCS in 2018. I worked on its annual report. So during the time, I visited a lot of people who were directly affected by conflict, and that actually was I mean, my parents were very worried. Obviously they still are. I recently, just a week ago, my father told me that are you sure that you are going to pursue your higher studies in this subject, because it is not safe for you, especially in Kashmir. So but I think that experience of working with JKCCS was that actually helped a lot in making me, my will stronger, uh, because we don't know a lot of things. The people from, even in I can't say in Kashmir, but people who live outside, they don't know a lot of things, and these stories should come out. These stories should be out there in, in media, in news, and people should know about it. So I guess I don't know what it has for me, and I don't know what the future has for us as journalists and as people of Kashmir. But I guess there is something that we have to do for our resistance, for our struggle, and we all have to do our bit. So that is it. And when it comes to my personal choice, what I want to do in it is, I'm basically more interested in filmmaking, in because I think
That's something
cinema,
different,
or
actually. Mhm.
yeah, that is actually different, but I am coming to that point. That films are, a form of art and a form of, like a form of great storytelling. So I guess via that, I would love to, share the stories of people, to share the stories of Kashmiris to the world, and I hope it works out, inshallah, in the future.
Like Anuradha ma'am said, we can use podcast, anything like that. This is
Yeah,
your way out,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
That's your way. Thank you so much, Meher. Anuradha ma'am, at the end, what would be your suggestion, your tips for every budding journalist, student, or normal journalist who are like stuck, and I guess you are most experienced among us right now. That at the end, please enlighten us with that.
I mean, one thing, let's not fool ourselves, even if, I mean, you're young, you're aspiring journalist, you want to enter the profession. Don't think of it this as a glamorous profession, something, a perception that has been created by television channels, particularly the
Mm-hmm.
Indian, those national level channels, which
For the
induce so much
TRPs.
of glamour. This is a profession, and it has always been associated with it, the multiple hazards that the journalists face. And so let's get real. If we are here, then we have to be ready for those challenges, and if you're ready for those challenges, you go ahead with it. Otherwise, I mean, you're fond of writing, you find or you found fond of documenting whatever, I would suggest there are other professions which would be more suitable. But if you are in journalism, you have to be ready for the risks. And if you're not ready for the risks, um, then either, which makes you more vulnerable to surrendering or self censorship. So at the end of the day, you won't be achieving much. But having said all this, I mean, in Kashmir, things are difficult, but I'm sure that there is also immense talent in Kashmir. Talent not just to write.
Yes.
I mean, in the 90s, we didn't, that was kind of a period of conflict where new talent wasn't emerging. That was more a silent period, in the sense that news was being told, but basic news, but how to tell it differently, how to bring out larger narratives. That was something missing, and that started in 2000s. Now thereafter that
Mm-hmm.
started, there are more restrictions, there is a different form of censorship, and a kind of censorship where even the state is not accountable anymore. Not that it was very accountable earlier, but now it's just completely brazen, and it's the one that completely takes away all your rights and powers. um, I'm sure it's not just the way of writing that the younger generation will start searching for, newer forms of writing, newer forms of journalism. They will also try to look at ways in which they can independently function. If there is talent and there is skill, there is compassion, there is passion. um, I'm sure we can think of ways in which we can negotiate ourselves through the crisis. If the
Yes.
crisis gets harder, um, I think it's we would have to get harder, and we would have to think of
We
more
will have to
innovative
strive for
methods.
our.
That's it.
Mhm.
I mean, it's very abstract what I said, but yeah.
No, thank you, thank you. That same question would be for you, because uh, after ma'am, you're the one who has who's most experienced in this field. Last question, so briefly, please
Yes,
tell us the
comparing apples and oranges. We've just started. But see, I do believe, like Anuradha ji said, that as of now, we're refusing to back down. We're refusing to give up. The odds are stacked against us, but I also see an opportunity. Uh, like so many different parts of the world have shown us successful models from moving away from this one corporate entity or a non-governmental entity funding news organizations, but instead moving back to the people and asking them to fund content. It's still a very non-successful model till now. We are also experimenting and failing with it, but I think it is the only way out if we want to sustain community journalism. uh, because whoever is going to pay your bills is going to control your narrative, and if
exact.
the root of journaling or journalism is to represent the people and basically speak truth to power, not the other way around, then maybe the revenue also has to come from these people who want to see quality content. And I think in the last few years, there's a niche audience which is kind of hooked on to, I would say, taken the bait of quality journalism, long form journalism, or actual representation of people, such type of content. And I believe in the coming days, we'll have to have a more successful marketing strategy of convincing them to actually pay for news. Otherwise, you get served what you get served on the so-called
Exactly.
national television. The second thing, which might be also an experiment in terms of imagining a better world for journalism in the future, is probably collaborative journalism, where small news organizations pool resources, because otherwise we have no chance of taking this forward, whether it be against the state or these channels which have tons of funding and can produce any type of content and can shape public opinion. Um, I mean, there are 3 news organizations here. I mean, the Kashmiriyat is hosting a discussion. I'm representing, or I'm talking from Free Press Kashmir. Anuradha ji is here. She needs no introduction. So I think we will eventually move towards that, because ideas will come together, and I'm still hopeful. I wouldn't say that it's the end of the world. It's a very difficult period, but regimes or these political processes are temporary. They will end, and what we're doing is something that is going to be permanent.
Permanent, exactly. Thank you. Journalism is not a crime. Truth seeks its way in any form. I thank every one of you for joining me today here, giving your precious time and sharing your valuable thoughts with us. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Anuradha ma'am. Thank you, Qazi, Zaid. Thank you, Sajad, Hameed, and thank you, Mehr.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. We expect your continuous support for providing us. We'll meet you again in the next episode of Straightforward. This is Aniqa signing off for the Kashmir.